All right, Amber, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I know we have a few that are still connecting to audio. I'm going to go ahead. So my name is Amber Gradero, and I am a career counselor for the Office of Career and Leadership Management here at Columbia School of Social Work, the mouthful. I will be moderating the chat today during the first half of the event, which will be our panel. So if you could just hold any specific questions towards the end of the panelists speaking. If you have broader questions, you can go ahead and ask, and we'll try to get to them towards the end of the panel, and I'll let Samantha introduce herself and further details.
Thanks, Amber. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Bruno. I am the Assistant Director of Career Services here at the Marxe School of Public and International Affairs at Baruch College. I'm so excited to be bringing this event on again. This is a continued collaboration between both our schools. So thank you for joining us for the DEI in hiring panel, ensuring talent equity. Before we get started, I'll just go over a quick agenda. So this first part of the session is being recorded. It is a moderated panel. As Amber said, if you have any questions in the chat, please feel free to type them in. The second part of today's agenda will be breakout rooms with our employer panelists today. Where you'll be able to speak to them in small groups, and we're going to have 2 of those breakout sessions. So in the meantime, please feel free to write your questions down if you want to meet with anyone specifically later. Get those questions ready. And now I'm going to pass it over to Janelle.
Hello, my name is Janelle Rollins, and I'm the Assistant Director here at Columbia. I'm going to introduce the panelists. The first one is Lakimja Mattocks. She's the Chief Talent and Equity Officer at LEAP, and I'll hand it over to Lakimja.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lakimja Mattocks, she, her. I'm really glad to be with you all today. I've been in the DEI space, specifically focusing on race equity since 2017 in the capacity building space and also supporting nonprofits with this work. And so I'm really happy to meet you all and looking forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakimja. I'll now introduce Kamilah Duggins, Senior Manager, People and Culture at Ford Foundation. I'll hand it over to Kamilah.
Thank you, Janelle. I'm glad to be here with all of you today. I'm Kamilah, she, her pronouns, and I've been with the foundation for quite a while, actually, more than 15 years. I think I'm coming up on 16 years now. And I've held, a range of positions, mostly within the people and culture team, although I did start working here on the program side of things as a research consultant in what's now the Media Arts and Culture program. So I've been here for a while. I've done a lot of things. Right now, I'm working on the talent acquisition team. And for the last 3 years, my responsibilities have spanned across talent acquisition and also what we are calling the core HR side, kind of doing business partner work, working on employee relations. So I really do understand the full, employee lifecycle experience, and I'm happy to bring and share whatever I can share with you all today. Happy to share my wisdom, my experience, and then of course learn from everybody in the room too.
Thank you, Kamilah. And now I'll introduce Kadian, Outar, Executive Director, Citywide Equity and Inclusion at NYC Department of Citywide Administration Services, commonly known as DCAS. I'll hand it over to Kadian.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, folks. My name again is Kadian Outar. I go by pronouns she, her, hers. I also like to do a self-description for those who may benefit. I am a Black female with short hair. I wear glasses. I am wearing a black scarf and a pinkish blouse, red lipstick, and a beautiful smile. And I have been in recruitment for over 10 years. I've been with the New York City Department of Administrative Services for the last 8 years. I do and really manage an Office of Citywide Recruitment, as well as a policy and program development team that handles and provide DEI best practices for 80+ agencies across the city. equity. So I'm really excited to be here. Looking forward to your questions and to learning from you and the other folks on the panel. I'll turn it back over to you, Janelle.
Thank you so much, Kadian. Sam?
Yeah, so thank you so much again for all of our panelists for being here today. I'm going to pin our panelists so you can see them bright and clear. Let's see, pin, and one more pin here. I'll also pin myself today as the moderator. All right, so thank you for joining us today. First of all, I want to thank you for having such inclusive introductions. We think we really appreciate the examples that you show and how to be inclusive in your introductions. So we'll get started. So from our perspective in career services, and this is coming from me and my colleagues here, we find that many of our applicants need to prepare for DEI-related questions in their job applications, whether it's on their documents, maybe it's in their interview. So how can candidates best highlight their DEI skills or experiences from a subject matter or a mission-oriented perspective? And I'll clarify on that last part there. A lot of the times when we are preparing for any sort of interview, et cetera, we tend to think things in terms of tasks. Like I know I've done this before, and sometimes it's so straightforward. So would love to hear what your thoughts are on that. And anyone here can start.
I will start because usually I am doing these panels and I don't like the silence. So, hi, folks. I think one of the things that when we are doing our interviews and we're interviewing for our positions, which we are hiring for, we usually ask folks, if they have an interest in EEO or DEI related work. And so most of the time, folks will let us know, they will speak more about the advocacy part of things of DEI and EEO, and not necessarily about the process and implementations and policy, which is the kind of work that we do. So for students to really understand the difference between the advocacy, going on and say, yeah, let's do this, versus creating policies internally, learning around how to operationalize those policies and processes so that it's not a one and done situation. It is, it's something that can be carried on throughout the city and for anybody who comes in and benefit. So it's great to know to differentiate that depending on the position that they're going into. I also see when we ask folks, why are they interested in this type of work? Sometimes individual will say something about, they have previously been discriminated against, or something happened, or their family comes from immigration and they're immigrants or something like that. But also they tend to miss the part about like that genuine interest in terms of moving things forward and contributing to, creating a policy or creating different processes that can help better the situation that we're in. So to get a little bit more deeper into why this is something that's interesting to you and how you can apply that in a particular position, especially if you're looking to go into a DEI role, because usually it's very broad in terms of what we do there. I'll stop there.
I can jump in. I'll just say, I think echoing some of what you shared, Kadian, and I think for us, I'll speak for myself. We have a few people here who are interviewing at the base level and the recruitment level. And then of course, people are continuing to go on in higher level conversations when they advance in the process. But I always think it's good to think about kind of how you have applied certain lenses to your work. So whatever you've done, like if you've been in a club, if you've been in a president of a club, if you've run a newspaper, like really like whatever you have been involved with. I mean, even if you're doing research, writing a paper, it's really like asking yourself the question, have I put a gender justice lens on this? Have I put a racial justice lens on this? A disability lens? I mean, like all the things we're looking at, but there's so many ways that we think about diversity now. It's expanded so much. And we know it's not just about race. It's not just about gender. It's not just about ability. Now we're talking about inclusivity. We're talking about belonging. And so if you've been in a space and you've noticed a gap and you've done something about that gap, that's great, bring that up. If you've been in a space And you realize that your perspective is really unique. You know, maybe you're in a room full of New Yorkers and you're from Mississippi. Like, let's talk about how you do it in Mississippi. You know, what's different there? So I think, you know, begin to really expand and think beyond, I think, what's like kind of the normal or typical scope of diversity. And so what you've done and what you brought to the various spaces that you've been a part of. And that can have a lot of impact. And that's something that's not cookie cutter, that's not performative, that you can't get out of a book, right? That's something unique to you. And so that's always going to help you in these interview situations.
Just building off of what has already been shared, the important piece is also doing your homework, right? Seeing what DEI means for the organization or agency, and then thinking about, you know, what your value and your personal mission is, and how do you intersect those things? How do you tell the story around your values, your mission, and how it connects to the DEI work that is shared, whether on the website and or the LinkedIn page? Like, make sure you dig into, you know, the communications of that agency and or organization, because you can then also craft your experience to align with some of the communications that have been shared. I'll share a very quick detail. My personal mission after I left Temple University, that's where I went to undergrad, became to prevent young people and people who look like me from entering the criminal justice system. I did a double major with psychology and criminal justice. So everything that I learned and saw based on my education, my life's work became like doing everything that I could to create more access and opportunity for communities that represented the ones that represented where I came from in Flatbush, Brooklyn, and also people who looked like me. And so there's ways to bring that, bridge that experience into what you're looking for.
Great, thank you so much. I mean, just hearing all of your answers there, Kamilah, I really actually appreciated what you said about bringing different lenses in, and you know, how are you reframing or what frames are you using? Quick question, and this, I didn't prep for this one, but I should have framed this first. What is the diversity, equity, and inclusion acronyms that you're currently using at your organizations? Because it does vary according to organizations. So just quickly, how is it framed in each of your organizations?
I can say within DCAS, we do DEI, but across the 80 different agencies, you may see the belonging to, you may see a whole lot of other things. So, but specifically for DCAS, we do DEI.
At LEAP, oh, okay. I was looking for my counterparts. At LEAP, we focus more on equity, inclusion, and justice.
Yeah, we're still using DEI at Ford.
Got it. Nice, thank you. So from there, could you tell us a little bit about the DEI initiatives, or the including justice and including belonging as well, that are currently in place at your organizations, and its impact on hiring practices? How did this change or influence any of your own practices as professionals who are carrying this throughout your work?
I can kick us off this time. So at LEAP, when I first joined LEAP back in July, so I'm approaching a year there. They had, yeah, so I'm still fairly new at LEAP, but not new to this work. And so when I joined, they had wrapped up working with a consultant, and from that consultant work, they started to create affinity groups. And so affinity groups are spaces that meet on a consistent basis, where they learn together, where they're able to bring in some issues that have come up in the organization, and work to like uplift those issues, talk about those issues, and bring solutions into the space that then they elevate the solutions into to the senior management. And so the way that has found its way into like the hiring practices is creating more opportunities for listening. And so when folks are make their way through the onboarding process, it's like, okay, how did this go? Is there anything that you would change or do differently in this process? Because we want to hear the voices of especially the new folks going through the process to see what we need to do differently in order to support someone's foundation and help them to be successful in their role, and to have a really great foundational experience in the organization. And so creating those spaces to hear more. I'm also about to begin listening into, state interviews. We do a lot of exit interviews. And so I'm about to implement some state interviews, which I'm really excited about, so that I learned more about what keeps people at LEAP. And so we can continue to do more of those things.
That's so interesting. Like the stay interviews. I love how you position that against like, yeah, everyone knows what an exit interview is, or everyone has heard of one, but the stay interviews and just quick follow-up question on that. Are you using the same questions across all employees, or does it differ for position or longevity in their roles?
No, right now everyone has the same set of questions, but it's interesting what a 2.0 would look like and whether or not that would change.
Interesting. Thank you so much. So I'll pass it to either Kamilah or Kadian.
So I can speak to what the city is doing. And so even though I work for DCAS, the work that I do and that we do is citywide. And so we, within city government, we are grounded by various rules, regulations, mandates, but also, just work that we want to do to better the work that is done within the city. So as it relates to DEI, there are some things that are very concrete that all, 80 plus agencies have to do. There, because of our city charter, there are mandates that requires that agencies complete annual diversity and EEO plans that let us know what their intentions are in diversifying their workforce and making sure that their workforce is inclusive, whether it is their internal folks that they work with or within the service that they provide to their community. So we, within my team, review their plans and say, okay, this is great, or no, this is what you did last year. Maybe you need to expand on it a little bit, or how are you doing? How are you progressing with these plans? We also institute what we call structured interviewing to make sure that everyone that's being interviewed, they're being asked the same questions. We also do unconscious bias trainings. And so when we have these group of hiring managers that are, responsible for bringing folks in, we are making sure that they're getting the trainings and all of these aspects that affects how we hire and who comes into the workforce. And one of the things that we also have are various employee resources groups. So you may have some agencies like NYPD, they will have about 20 or so, because you are you're engaging with different groups and different demographics and different backgrounds and different experiences. And then you have different agencies that DEI for them means a little bit something different from the city as a whole. And so that's, somebody mentioned that it's good to ask what DEI means for that company, because then when you're in the agency, we have one agency that's focusing on getting more individuals with disability and other focus that are on bringing more people of color or people with LGBTQ. And so bringing this all together to make sure that the city is at least at the level that we have a strong focus on DEI, understanding what that means. And then we have to report on it. We report on it to city council. We report on it to the general public, if people are watching and seeing what we do. But not only are we following these mandates, but we're doing surveys to check in, like, how are we doing? Do you know how to report an issue? Do you know who your equal employment opportunity officer is? Do you know the steps that's needed to, report something? Are you aware of the different trainings? What new trainings would you like to see based on what's happening? So there are a lot of different pieces that we focus on a broader scale. And then the agencies themselves have different focus there as well.
All right, I apologize. The light went out in here and I think it might be motion control. So I'm going to turn it back on in a second, but I think you all can still mostly see me. I mean, there's so much that we're doing around DEI. I mean, and I think, I kind of think of it as something that's all connected. Like, some things we do have a recruitment strategy, and we just call it a recruitment strategy. We don't call it a diversity recruitment strategy. It's just our strategy, right? And it has to be inclusive and meet our goals institutionally. But, I would say, we just got through recently in the last year doing an audit, a diversity audit for our organization, to get a better sense of what do we need to be focusing on? Because like many organizations, we survey our staff every other year, a deeper dive. And then on the off year, we do kind of a light touch on the things that came up over the year before, seeing if there's been any improvement. So, we have data points and information from things like that. From what I've learned from the results of the report from last year, we're going to be focusing on a few things. Starting with the individual, right? I think, Ford is a social justice foundation. And so because of the work that our output, there is, I think, an assumption here within the organization that we're doing great work, so we're doing great work. And that's happening everywhere, right? And so it's easy to fall back on that. And so the harder work is to make sure that we're continuing to look at ourselves and making sure we're not getting comfortable. We're not getting comfortable because we might be a majority people of color organization, or we might be majority women, right? So that's one thing. So we're going to be starting with the individual, then institution, then the team level, then the institution level. So it's going to take a few years, right? We're going to go down this whole path. The other piece of this is that we're going to make sure that we're creating spaces for the learning to actually take action. So how do we turn learning into action? We know now that just going to a conference, going to a seminar, going to something is not going to change the way you do your work. It's not going to change the way you engage unless you're called to do that, on a very consistent basis. So it's really about culture change, right? Changing the structures, changing the culture, changing the way we engage. And that all starts with like self-awareness, and then building knowledge, building skill. And then we continually, gradually take it to the next steps and next level. So that's kind of like bigger picture, what we're looking at in terms of initiatives. There's some other things that we do, I would say, in the hiring side that are very specific. So, when we're hiring for a team, for example, we make sure that we're talking to the hiring manager. Okay, this is what we mean when we say diversity. This is why diversity is important, why it has value. I mean, it's every single time, because people don't hire every day here. All managers aren't hiring on a constant loop. So it's our job to make sure that we're putting it in front of them and having that conversation with them every single time. And then saying, this is what that means. And then saying, and our president, he's very serious about this. He takes it seriously. So, we're fortunate in that way. We have the champion at the top. We're not fighting for somebody. I think this is important. We already know it's important. Resources are behind that. He's, our test is, when we're looking at the top candidate pool, do we see diversity? Not just like, did somebody apply, but would you actually hire one of these people? Okay. And so that's kind of our litmus test to say, like, are we doing our job? And not just making sure that we're picking and choosing, randomly, but we're looking at the makeup of the team. We're looking at the makeup of the organization, and we're saying, in the broad ways that we define diversity, this is what we're looking for. And so that's our job, then, to create a pool that is diverse, and then we bring that pool to the manager, and then they do their thing and they make their choices. But I think there's other ways of doing it too. We've had a couple of audits, and one of them, we learned that the result of that was that we decided to begin to work with a consultant around disability inclusion language. So Kadian she was a great example for all of us today, right? In the way that she described herself to everyone. So those are things we're still learning, but just, putting a note in our communication to candidates around, do you need an accommodation for this interview? If you need one, this is what you do. This is who you reach out to. And all these little things that you're learning, is a lot of the details, right? All the small things that you do to show who you are, what you care about. That is kind of like what signals to people that, yes, this is a safe place for you. We want you to be here. We can accommodate you. We want you to be part of the organization. And so other things like diversifying our sources, these are all like kind of standard practices in recruitment. Encouraging people with lived experiences to apply, amplifying our work so people know that this is a safe space. We want people to come here and be themselves. Looking at our policies and practices and making sure that they're inclusive. Are we leaving out caregivers? Are, you know, who are, you know, are we leaving out people who have children with disabilities? Who are we leaving out? And so diversity, as we, you know, in a very simple sense, is kind of like more of what you don't have, right, in a way. And then making space for everybody, making space for all of us to be included. And so, you know, we're looking at all of our policies, practices, our engagement, and making sure we're continuing to lift that up. And, you know, I think at the core of that also is around respect. You know, making sure that we're creating an environment where people feel respected, understanding what that means, and then continuing to pivot and change and be responsive to those needs.
Yes, thank you so much, Kamilah. I love what you just said, like, you know, diversity is taking in like more of what you don't have. And I really liked in the first part of your answer, you had really alluded to that, you know, you have a DEI goal now. Once that goal is achieved, that's not over. Like it constantly has to be reevaluating itself, because yes, what if you do become like less inclusive in other areas, et cetera. So I really appreciate you pointing out that sort of like cyclical work of what this is. And Kadian, when you were answering, what really came to mind was, you know, that illustration of, you know, people trying to look over the fence to see the baseball game, and then, you know, everyone has the same stool, but still like there's some people that can't see, and really saying like equity is that everyone has a stool to see what we're all working on. So that was so clearly that's what came through. So thank you so much for all of your answers there. So my next question is, what are, and I will, oh yeah, sorry. My next question is, what are some of the initiatives or strategies that you've seen that improve the retention of BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, and other underrepresented peoples, whether it's in your organizations, in your own experience, beyond, in your careers, that counter the ideas of what we think of performative activism? And I know that was like sort of a long question. Feel free to take it in separate parts as well.
Well, I mean, everybody else has volunteered to go first before, so I guess that's my turn to volunteer to go first. And I'll just say, you know, I think some of the things that have already been raised is what we've done. You know, when we see certain numbers dipping, you know, we pay attention to that. You know, we kind of capture in our surveys what's going on. So, you know, one thing that we've implemented in the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, has been employee resource groups or affinity groups. Others have mentioned those. And I think they're really powerful because, you know, it's one of the things we do as part of a DEI approach, but also just a culture building approach that's not top down. You know, you go into an ERG or an affinity group and it's like, it really is community led, so to speak, right? Led by the people. You don't have to be a director, you don't have to be a vice president, and it allows people a chance to really blossom. And so on the belonging side of the DEI kind of equation, you know, I think ERGs can go a really long way. I think, you know, going back to just being responsive to survey results and things like that, one thing that came out, I can't remember, it was probably a couple of surveys ago now, was that, you know, women of color were feeling like they needed more professional development opportunities. So, okay, so we decided to create like a coaching program, really, that was created based on this response, you know, open to all, but the majority of participants are women of color. I would say younger women of color at that. And it's called Limitless Potential, and it's been amazing. It really has been. In fact, this morning I was just doing a peer coaching, facilitating a peer coaching with one of the groups. And so things like that, you know, have been really helpful. You know, creating pathways where people have spoken the need have really gone a long way. I think some other things we've done over the years that have been helpful are just kind of, you know, being open to calling in trainers as needed. So we have done some training on, you know, centering gender, some training on, you know, there's been a particular group that has been formed around an anti-racism learning journeys, trans inclusivity. You know, we have disability dishes, you know, on a monthly basis where we talk with the people who lead our disability work. And so I think creating all these spaces, all these platforms for voice, all these indicators for inclusiveness and belonging have kind of gone a long way for us in retention of certain groups.
Thank you. And I'll jump in to add to that. I know Kamilah mentioned the ERGs that seems to be very popular within the city, because this is really the community-led part of it, allows folks to be engaged and giving them the opportunity to know that there is manager buy-in, there is leadership buy-in, allows them to go as far as they can with it. Some of the things that we also do is, with the George Floyd situation and everything, we created a lot of race equity groups and a race equity initiative where we're allowing for the space to have uncomfortable conversation. And how do we moderate that? Is that something that we are capable of doing in-house? Do we need to bring external folks to come in and help us to moderate those conversations? But making sure that we're creating the space to have that. And again, not just focusing on race. It starts there, because of what's happening in the social climate, but there are other areas that are impacted. There's, for us, and one of the work that we do, disability etiquette training, disability inclusive training that we provide to our hiring managers to make sure that this is what it looks like when you're hiring individuals with disabilities, when you're engaging individuals with disabilities across the board. I think Kamilah mentioned it, having that language in when you're confirming an interview, do you need accommodation? Or we have, with the pandemic, we kind of resulted and went to let's do everything virtually. But virtual interviews don't work for everyone. So it's giving the folks an option. Do you prefer to do in person or virtual? Those are some of the things that we're seeing happening now, and the conversations are, and giving folks the voice to say, I need this in order to do my job successfully. I need to have a chair. I need to have a headset. I need to have a quiet moment, and allowing managers to know that it's okay for them to ask for that. It's their right, as employees, as applicants, as a community that we engage in, it is their right to do so. We also, and for us, in terms of the recruitment piece, we make sure that we do targeted outreach to different communities. So there is a posting on the job board, but typically that attracts the same kind of candidates. What are you doing to deliberately attract candidates, especially in areas that you know that you're underrepresented or underutilized? Our agencies receive a quarterly report that lets them know what their demographics look like within their agency, and they're asked to use that to determine what their recruitment strategy should be. And the work that is being done is to promote the positions, the opportunities, so you have diverse candidates applying. You have a pool of diverse candidates, and that's it. Then you go with the qualified candidate, the best candidate for the job. But you want to make sure that the candidate pool is diverse. And so there are a lot of different things that are happening that are exciting, because for the recruitment piece, I mentioned we are doing a weekly hiring events because the city has a lot of vacancies, and we're going out into the communities. We're going to where those applicants are to make sure that we're getting a diverse group of candidates that are applying for the jobs, because at the end of the day, they're going to be serving the community. And when we're serving the community, they're looking for people that looks just like them, that understand their challenges, that understand their needs. And so we want to make sure that our workforce is representative of the community that we serve.
And I'll chime in here. It's like a yes and to all that has been shared, right? And so I don't want to repeat anything. So what I want to contribute to this question is, when I first started back in July, one of the first things I did was a compensation review. And so I did straight out the gate, did a compensation review, and then I did some level setting with salaries. And so that was very important, especially when it came to not only longevity and merit, but also like doing a comparison of salaries across, the sector as it relates to that role. And so, and seeing how, some folks, specifically women of color, were under paid, or their salary was a little lower. And so making sure to level set or right set those salaries. And then the other piece of our work, what I didn't share is LEAP is an arts education nonprofit, and we have 42 full-time folks, and we have like 300 part-time folks across New York City, because we do arts residencies in day schools, and then we have about 20 to 25 after-school programs in Brooklyn and the Bronx. And so with that, it's important for our staff who are in our communities, in our schools, to see that there is a pathway for them to be directors of communication, development directors, to be the executive director in the organization, right? And so creating real opportunities for them to not only, engage with staff at different levels, but also and I'm firming this up here at LEAP, is create a true pathways program where they can shadow folks, where there's opportunities for mentoring and further like learning that doesn't require them to have to go back to school in order to advance in the organization. And so it's my hope that, these initiatives will retain our folks for the long haul.
That's when you said salary leveling, I mean, if everyone saw everyone else's faces, we were all like, oh my gosh. Because like I know, like in my experience, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. And a lot of the articles I see around salary leveling it's the employees initiative, and it's to ask those questions and whatnot. So it's always all about like how to go about these conversations, et cetera. So it's really refreshing to hear that, it's not necessarily it's not just the employee that cares about it, it's also the employer. So thank you for sharing that. So we do have a little bit of
Can I just add a little tidbit? And also when someone is like setting a low salary for a staff person, like I will see it, and before we even start the recruitment, I'm like, no, we're having a conversation, let me tell you what the salary really needs to look like for this role. I know what your budget says, but we want to make sure that we're paying a livable wage, we're paying a competitive wage. And so I help the hiring managers, like we work in partnership when it comes to that as well. And many times we have to be a disruptor. And so we have to disrupt certain patterns of behaviors and things that have been a norm, and help folks to work outside of the norm.
Yes, absolutely. Breaking outside, and then being that advocate, not only for yourself, but it's also for others. Absolutely. So my final question, because we do have some time, is I like to always ask the professionals in the room to say, what is one resource, or whether it's a podcast, a news article you read lately, that you recommend for our candidates to follow up on as we well, not of course, like the program's not ending just yet, but as we go into the second portion, what is a resource that you recommend that candidates look into, or our participants look into, as we leave this conversation?
I would say for a podcast, Dare to Leap by Brené Brown. Usually she has some really good guests on there that speak about DEI in all sense of the word. The podcast is no longer, active in terms of they're not producing any more new episodes, but you can go through the listing and find a lot of really good episodes where she's speaking to a number of folks, those that are affected by it, those that are creating the policy and the impact. It's just a really good conversation whenever you need to hear something that's down to earth, and it's going to let you know, like, yes, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to hear. Okay, where do I go next?
I can go. I've been an active member of the Undoing Racism First Monday meetings that is led by Mary Pendergreen and some others. So I've been a part of that community since 2017, and it's pretty open. And so even though it says like executives undoing racism, there's folks at every level in an organization or agency, and it's every first Monday of the month. I can drop the link in the chat before we close, because it's a really amazing space. And then that's the umbrella. And then there are some affinity groups that are a part of that community as well. So there's like the space for white leaders, there's a space for middle managers, there's a space for Black executives, like there's a space for everyone under the umbrella. And they have subgroups that meet separate from the first Mondays. And so I'll definitely make sure to share that information, because there's great learning that happens as a collective, as a sector. And so, yes, we'll definitely share that. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm not a big podcast person, but I have been exposed to a couple that have been interesting. I don't know that it's not particularly relevant to this topic, but I will say one thing that I love, and I'm also a coach, and I do recommend this to my coaching clients a lot of times, is this one called, there's a book and there's also a podcast to go along with it called Radical Candor. And it might be a little bit beyond where people are at. And I don't know who's in the room and what level everybody is at. I'm assuming we have a lot of students here, but it really is great. I mean, it could be great to start listening to now, because it really is all about how to be a great manager. And I think, when we think about DEI principles and all that, I mean, it really just, it comes into play everywhere. It's not a standalone topic, right? It's really woven into all that we do, how we engage, how we manage, how we're being managed, how we're managing ourselves, all these things. In any case, I like that book. I like that podcast. I think it's great. I also think if there are any newer managers in this room, I really like the Management Center, especially if you're working in nonprofit space. We've done a lot of work with them. Their book is really excellent. They have a lot of free resources online on how to create diverse, how to create great questions for your interviews, how to bring diversity into your decision-making processes. So it's a great resource, I think, for a lot of people at various stages.
Great, thank you so much. Like all three of the chat is going off, like just as you were listing off your resources. So I really, really appreciate that. All right, so thank you so much. If everyone here could help me in virtually thanking our panelists today for joining us as we head into the second part of our session. All right, so now I'm going to stop this recording.